What they told you about the Dark Ages is a lie. A carefully engineered deception designed to hide a terrifying truth about power, one that has been protected for 1,000 years. You wake not to the crow of a rooster, but to a low, rhythmic scraping from beneath your floorboards. It's a sound like bone dragging on stone, a sound you've been taught to fear. The darkness in your one-room hovel is a living thing, thick with the sweet, metallic scent of damp earth and something else, something acrid and forbidden. The star chart your father kept hidden there, the one he taught you to read in secret. He told you it was for tracking the seasons, for knowing when to plant the herbs. But the constellations on the parchment don't match the heavens above. You realize it now, with a clarity that cuts through the mental fog. It's not a map of the stars. It's a map of the harvests. What they don't want you to know is that the songs are a lie. The histories, written by monks with clean hands, are a lie. They built the statues to the men with swords, but 97% of the skeletons unearthed from the mud of Towton tell a story the powerful have tried to bury for centuries. A story of arrows and clubs. A story written not in ink, but in shattered bone. You feel it now, crouched behind a splintered cart, the world reduced to a stinking, rain-soaked chaos. What they don't want you to know is that in this world, there is no such thing as trash. There is only life, death, and the things that can be made from them. Nothing is ever truly thrown away, because away doesn't exist. Survival is a ruthless act of transformation. You pass the cobbler's apprentice, not mending a shoe, but carefully cutting a usable square of leather from a worn-out boot. The rest to be boiled down for glue. You see a woman at her doorway, her needle flashing. It isn't a map of graves and forgotten saints, like the priest shows you. It's a map of life. It shows the secret paths that weave through the king's patrols, the hidden villages where the smoke from their fires is cleverly baffled to disappear into the canopy. The deadfall traps, not for animals, but for the Lord's men. It is a map of resistance. A low whistle cuts through the night, the call of a barn owl, but not one made by any bird. It's the signal. His hand is open, but not for you. You stand near the market gate, the stench of dung and boiled cabbage thick in the air, and you see what everyone else misses. 99% of people walking past see a beggar, a broken man caked in the grime of the road, his eyes downcast. They see a plea for a copper coin. You see a signal. He isn't begging, he is broadcasting. His fingers twitch, a subtle flick of the wrist, a language written in the air for a fraction of a second. An ancestor of yours, a friend of your neighbor, the woman who sold milk at the market, immortalized in their final, terrifying moments for all to see. It's the medieval version of the surveillance camera, a symbol of omnipresent authority designed not just to punish, but to alter behavior through the sheer, creeping weight of constant observation. You think twice about skipping Vespers when a stone face with a lolling tongue seems to stare directly into your window. You bite back a curse against the tax collector when you pass under the shadow of a creature whose eyes are gouged out. The priest calls the sound the devil's work, a whispered warning in the cold light of Sunday Mass. But what if the devil isn't what you should be afraid of? This is the secret they buried in the mud and the mire. The peasants weren't stupid. They were systematically crippled. They possessed an ancestral knowledge of engineering, agriculture, and medicine that terrified the nobility and the church. Self-sufficiency was the ultimate threat to their control. Recent archaeological analysis of what they called peasant tools has revealed that 99% of people have this wrong. Many weren't for farming at all. A calendar of death, tracking the cycles of rye cultivation across the duchy, with marks that correspond to every story you've ever heard of a village suddenly falling from God's grace. Your family wasn't just hiding knowledge. They were tracking a weapon. You stumble towards the cellar door, your hand trembling as you lift the iron latch. The question is no longer what is happening, but why. Why would your father, who taught you the names of wildflowers and the importance of truth, be tangled in a conspiracy of poison and lies? The air is thick enough to chew, a coppery perfume of blood and churned earth. You try to breathe through your mouth, but the metallic taste of fear coats your tongue. A man screams, a high, thin sound that's cut short with a wet, sickening thud. It's a sound you've learned to identify. The sound a mace makes when it meets a skull, like a dropped melon splitting on a stone floor. It's a sound that will live behind your eyes forever. Your fingernails dig into the rotting wood of the cart, scraping splinters into your skin. Listen, the patch on her child's tunic is a different color, a different weave, a scrap from a life it lived before. Every thread has a soul, a history, and is used until it turns to dust. The very bones of the city hold this secret. You run your hand along the wall of a new merchant's house, and the mortar isn't just gray. It's flecked with red and brown, a gritty constellation of 100 broken pots, 1,000 shattered jugs, all painstakingly ground down and given new purpose. You pull a small, carved token from your pouch, its wood worn smooth by your anxious thumb. It is your turn to make the delivery. You move forward, deeper into the forbidden green, a ghost in your own land. But as another twig snaps behind you, closer this time, a cold dread washes over you. The map shows you the paths of the free. It doesn't show you the faces of the traitors. It's a gesture you were taught in a hushed voice, a warning you were told could mean the difference between a full belly and a slit throat. The city watch is on the move, and they've been paid extra tonight. The message is received by a cut purse across the way, whose eyes narrow almost imperceptibly. It's seen by a woman selling duteous meat pies, who quietly pulls one of her offerings from the display. It ripples through the crowd, a silent, invisible current of information. It is fear, calcified and raised to the heavens. You retreat from the window and descend the damp stone steps back into your cellar. The air is thick with the smell of wet earth and aging wine. Your single tallow lamp throws a weak, trembling circle of light. You run your hand along the cold, sweating wall, your fingernails scraping against the rough-hewn stone, the sound like a rat scrabbling in the dark. There, your fingers find it, a small, almost hidden carving. No bigger than your fist. They were sophisticated devices for tracking stars and managing water, technology believed lost after Rome fell. This knowledge was a direct threat. To control the populace, a new kind of war was waged, a psychological one. They introduced a weapon, subtle and insidious, that would turn your own mind against you, creating a dark age not through ignorance, but through a deliberate and sinister campaign of mental sabotage. The blueprint is the same one used today. Control the information, control the food, and you control the mind. The answer waits in the damp dark below, and you know, with a certainty that chills you more than any phantom whisper, that it will be a truth far harder to survive than the sickness itself. Were they trying to stop it, or were they forced to help create it? Past the roar and the rain, you can hear it, the grunting of men heaving, the shriek of metal on metal, the soft, final sighs of the dying. A knight clanks past your hiding spot, a giant of steel and misplaced glory. He's a living fortress, but what 99% of people will never understand is that his armor is also his tomb. Through the narrow slit of his helmet, he sees almost nothing. He swings his greatsword in a clumsy arc, a blind man swatting at flies. He stumbles, his metal-shod feet slipping in the blood-slick mud. 99% of people will never learn that this world wasn't built on stone and prayer alone. It was built on its own failures, its own fragments. The sound of a hammer on metal rings out, and you know the blacksmith isn't forging a new sword, but hammering a cracked plowshare into a dozen precious nails. Waste is a luxury only the dead can afford. Then you hear it, a faint scraping from below the street. A circular stone shifts, and a man emerges from the darkness, blinking in the gray light. The priest says your soul is a thing to be taxed, mortgaged, and saved only by gold. The book in your cellar says your soul is the only thing you truly own. You run your fingers over the worn leather of the great ledger, the official record of your family's life. Every bushel of wheat sold, every debt owed. But its real value is hidden. You press a specific worn knot in the wooden cover. There's a soft click, the sound of a secret breathing for the first time in a generation. And a section of the spine gives way. What the powerful don't want you to know, what the priests and the lords pretend doesn't exist, is that the underbelly of this world has a nervous system. They want you to believe the dispossessed are a chaotic swarm of individual desperation. But you know the truth. The thieves, the beggars, the lepers, the outcasts, they are not a mob. They are a guild. They have their own laws, their own territories, and their bone-hidden language. A tongue of symbols and gestures known as the thieves' cant. A gargoyle face, its mouth a perfect O of despair, its stone eyes wide with a horror you can now fully comprehend. It is identical to the third one from the left on the cathedral's southern spire. You know, because you've spent the last 3 nights staring at it, the metallic taste of fear coating your tongue. Next to the carving, almost lost in the shadows, are the faint, chiseled letters of a name whispered in your family for generations as a tragedy, a shame. A man who fell from God's grace. Elric, your great-grandfather. The scraping beneath your home isn't demonic. It's the sound of forbidden knowledge being etched into stone, a desperate attempt to preserve the truth before it's erased forever. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. By the end of this journey, you'll see this era not as a period of ignorance, but as the largest information cover-up in human history. You'll never trust the official story again. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. The paper in your hand isn't a promise of love. It's a death sentence for a family, written in ink and sealed with a lie they call God's will. You stand in the thin crowd as the wedding procession shuffles past, a river of quiet misery flowing toward the stone church. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed wool, nervous sweat, and the cloying scent of a few desperate flowers strewn on the mud-packed street, already trampled into a brown paste. Your eyes lock on the bride. She is barely 15. If he falls, he will die. The weight of his own protection, the very symbol of his power, will press him into the earth, and he will drown in 6 inches of filthy water. This is the great secret of the battlefield. Chivalry is a fairy tale told to nobles. The reality is this blind, suffocating, clumsy dance with death. The real killers are silent. Over the ridge, you see them. The lowborn, the boys from your village, the archers. You see one, a lad named Thomas, whose face is still soft with youth. Pull his warbow. He's caked in filth, his clothes little more than rags, but in his hand he holds a small, tarnished silver buckle. This is a tosher, a sewer hunter. The powerful call them the lowest of the low, scavengers who live in the city's guts. But that's the public story. The secret one is that they are licensed prospectors in a subterranean world, paying a fee to the Lord for the right to mine the city's effluents for lost coins, dropped jewelry, and scrap metal. They are a recognized and profitable profession. Inside, nestled in yellowed linen, is a small carved dove. It's no bigger than your thumb, but holding it feels like holding the sun. The air in the cellar is cold, smelling of damp earth and mice. A single candle pushes back the darkness, making your shadow a giant on the stone wall. This is the secret symbol of the Cathar faith, the mark of the good Christians, the heretics, the ones the church burned to save. That's the story they tell in the village square. The story painted on the church walls. It's a covert network, older than the cathedral, operating in every shadow and alleyway. They use it to mark safe houses, to identify corrupt guards who can be bribed, to signal the location of wealthy merchants with heavy purses. It's an intricate web of shared knowledge, a direct challenge to the authorities' absolute control over what is known. It's the whisper that can topple a night. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the damp air. This is a secret war, fought not with swords, but with symbols. He wasn't just executed for speaking out against the bishop's tithes. He was made into a warning. His memory, his very face, was stolen and turned into a brick in the church's wall of fear. This carving is the proof, a secret passed down in silence, a truth hidden in the foundations of the very house he built. Suddenly, a floorboard creaks on the floor above you, a heavy, deliberate footstep. Not your wife's, not your son's. You freeze, your breath catching in your throat. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin, and live the life they never got to finish. But be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. Her face is the color of milk, a stark canvas for the terror swimming in her eyes. This isn't the blush of a new beginning. It's the bloodless pallor of a final end. She is property being transferred, a soul being signed away. Your thumb smooths the rough edge of the parchment you hold, a copy of her marriage contract. It feels ancient, brittle. To anyone else, it's a standard agreement. A dowry of 3 pigs, a small parcel of land, a promise of fealty. But you know the secret language hidden within the cramped Latin. The yew groans, a sound like an old tree groaning in the wind. He draws the string back to his ear, his whole body a machine of tension. Then the release. The bowstring sings a sharp, vicious note. You don't follow the arrow with your eyes, you follow it with your ears. A high-pitched whistle, then a muffled and a choked gasp from the line of advancing men-at-arms. Another scream is born and dies. Thomas is already knocking another arrow. The most shocking secret, however, assaults your nose as you turn the corner. The sharp, stinging reek of ammonia that makes your eyes water. You see the cart, laden with wooden barrels, standing outside the tanner's workshop. This isn't wine or water. It's urine, a sterile and valuable commodity, collected daily from public pots and private homes, sold to the tanners to degrease wool and soften leather, to the dyers to fix their colors. The piss collector is a businessman, his cargo more vital to the city's industry than the Lord's imported wine. And there it is, the great hidden conspiracy. 99% of people believe the Great Albigensian Crusade was a holy war. They don't know it was the medieval world's first and most brutal corporate raid. It was never about saving souls. It was about liquidating a competitor whose business model was simply too successful. The church preached that poverty was holy, while sitting on mountains of gold extracted from the faithful. The Cathars taught that community was holy, and they built a world to prove it. It's the ancestor of the things that will one day haunt kings in their sleep. Encrypted channels, dark nets, ghost networks used by those who refuse to be controlled. The powerful build stone walls to keep people in line, but information has always found a way to seep through the cracks. The beggar's flicked wrist is a single packet of data in a system they can't even see. He is a living, breathing node in a web that stretches from the docks to the castle walls. The flickering lamplight casts your shadow, long and distorted, against the wall, making it dance with the screaming face of your ancestor. They know you found it. The secret wasn't just buried, it was waiting. The church told you the sickness was a punishment from God. The secret they buried is that the cure was growing just outside your village walls. You stand in a place that shouldn't exist, a pocket of green defiance hidden within a grim circle of yew trees. The air itself feels heretical, thick with the sharp, clean scent of lavender and the damp, earthy perfume of freshly dug roots. This is the healer's garden. The priest calls her a witch. Your desperate hope calls her your only chance. He told you to pray. She told you to come at dusk. 99% of people will live and die by these contracts, never knowing they were meticulously engineered to fail. Your finger traces an impossible clause. The final dowry payment is due on the feast day of a saint that falls during the driest month of the year, a time when no farmer has coin. Another line demands a healthy male heir within 18 months, a coin toss with God that a woman cannot control. Miss a payment, fail to produce a son, and the penalties are ruinous. First the livestock, then the tools, then the land itself. He and his brothers are a relentless, faceless storm of death, their shafts piercing mail and eye slits with cold indifference. They will not be in the songs. Their names will not be carved on any stone. They are the true architects of this butchery, and history will erase them completely. This is the oldest lie, the one that keeps the whole rotten structure from collapsing. They sanitize the violence, painting it with honor and glory, so that a new generation of boys will be eager to march into this same mud. The Lord's Reeve stands in the square, decrying the filth of the city, warning of pestilence and divine wrath. He uses this narrative to justify the new sanitation tax, a coin from every household for a service that barely exists. He creates the problem with his words, then sells you the solution with his tax. It's a trick of power as old as time itself. Create a crisis, stoke the fear, and then profit from the fabricated cure. It's the same today, isn't it? A problem is always more profitable than a real solution. A world without debt, where women were spiritual equals to men, where all property was shared, and where no priest grew fat on the tithes of the starving. They built a better world, and for that, they were branded devils and annihilated. You close your fist around the wooden dove. Its smooth, worn surface is a comfort against your sweating palm. Your thumb traces the grain of the wood, a silent prayer against the rough skin of your palm. Your grandmother gave this to your father, and he to you. And the terrifying truth that's beginning to dawn on you is that this web is larger, more complex than you ever imagined. Your mind flashes back to the cellar beneath your hovel, the damp, clinging cold, the smell of earth and mice, and the carving on the stone. You remember the sound your fingernail makes as it scrapes along the deep-cut grooves. A dry, dusty whisper in the silence. It's not just a few random marks left by a previous tenant. You recognize some of them now. A circle with a slash, danger. A triangle pointing down, a corrupt official. The scraping has stopped. For a moment, the silence is worse than the noise. It's a heavy, listening silence. The kind that presses in on your eardrums from the outside. You hold your breath, and the only sound is the frantic, wet thumping of your own heart against your ribs. The puzzle is complete. It wasn't a single secret hidden in this cellar. It was a blueprint, and the picture it forms is so monstrous, so utterly diabolical, it makes the idea of simple demons in the fog feel like a child's comforting fable. Or back is to you, a slight curve of bone and wool against the fading light. Her hands, knuckles swollen but fingers nimble, work over a flat stone. There's the wet, rhythmic scraping of a trowel against a mandrake root, a sound like fingernails on a coffin lid. 99% of what you'll read about these women sanitizes them, calls them simple herbalists. That's the comfortable lie. The truth is, they were the last librarians of a banned and ancient science. All of it forfeited to the local lord who drafted this very document. It's a harvest of a different kind, and your neighbors are the crop. You look from the parchment to the stone-faced lord, watching the procession from his balcony, and you understand. This isn't a wedding, it's a foreclosure. The church, standing as the supposed moral heart of this world, is the notary in this grand theft. The priest will bless this predatory agreement with holy water and a vacant smile. It's the same reason a king tells you it is noble to die for a flag, while his own sons count gold in a castle far from the screaming. The hero narrative is the most effective weapon ever forged, because it makes the poor and the powerless beg for the privilege of dying for the rich. It hides the grotesque reality of a boy, your neighbor, choking on his own blood in a field far from home. Later, when the killing is done for the day, you are in your cellar. They sell you fear about the world, so they can sell you the walls to hide behind. Later, when the moon is a sliver in the sky, you descend the stone steps into your cellar. The air is cold and smells of damp earth and old roots. Your fingers, calloused and knowing, find the loose stone behind the potato bin. The scrape of it against its neighbors is a sound of pure, quiet secrecy, an ASMR track for the hidden economy. You pull out the oilcloth-wrapped bundle. It's not gold. It's a ledger. the book they must never find. She was a perfecta, one of the spiritual elite who lived a life of extreme piety and asceticism. She wasn't the devil-worshipping monster the friars scream about. You remember her smile, the way she taught you that the divine spark was in every living thing, the bee, the blade of grass, you. She taught you that the God of the Old Testament, the one of wrath and jealousy and plagues, was a lesser, corrupt being. The true God was a creature of pure love and light, who would never create a hell. You thought it was just local underworld business, a way to avoid trouble, to know which watchman to slip a coin to. But there are other symbols there, stranger ones, a broken sheaf of wheat, a stylized sickle, symbols you've heard whispered in connection with the peasant revolts, the secret meetings in the deep woods where farmers sharpen their scythes and talk of a world without lords. The air in your lungs feels thin. The carving in your cellar isn't just a glossary. It's a Rosetta Stone. It's the missing link, the place where two great conspiracies meet. 99% of people will live and die believing their suffering is the will of God, or the cruel randomness of fate. The forbidden truth, etched into this cold stone under your trembling fingers, is that the chaos has a board of directors. The famine that weakened the village last winter wasn't a failed harvest. It was a market correction. The grain from the Lord's own stores, the one he so generously distributed, had a faint, bitter taste. The ergot fungus, they called it. An accident. But the monastery, just a day's ride away, cultivates the purest rye. In her hands isn't just a root. It's a library of trial and error, stretching back 1,000 years before the first stone of your church was ever laid. She gestures to a bundle of willow bark. For the fever, she murmurs, not turning around. You know its bitter tea can silence the pounding in your skull, a miracle the church would have you pay penance for. She points to a clay pot containing a poultice of moldy bread, its green-blue fuzz, a terrifying sight. What they don't want you to know, what the church has sealed in its records for 800 years, is the true masterstroke of this system. The moral infraction clauses. Archaeologists are just now unearthing the parish ledgers that prove it. A whispered rumor of adultery, a missed confession, a daughter seen talking to a boy from the wrong village. Any invented sin was a trigger, an excuse to void the contract and seize everything. The faintest scrape of fingernails against the church's wooden door sounds like a coffin being nailed shut. The smell of damp earth and rotting apples is a comfort. The battle is a ringing in your ears, a tremor in your hands. By the light of a single tallow candle, its flame guttering as your shadow dances on the stone, you run your finger over your own secret. Tucked away in a dark corner, you've been carving a diagram into the cellar's foundation. It's not a sword, it's not a shield, or a crest. It's a small, wickedly detailed drawing of a caltrop. 4 iron spikes welded together, designed so that one point is always facing up. It doesn't track debts of coin. It tracks the real currency of this city. 3 barrels of lye to the soap maker, paid in salt. 1 sack of bone char to the alchemist for a tincture. 7 pounds of scavenged iron from the toshers, traded for bread and cheese. This is the secret circulatory system of your world, the black market of waste that keeps the poor from starving and the city from collapsing, all operating in the shadow of the Lord's taxes and proclamations. Your finger traces the last entry, written just this morning. The ink is still dark. A dangerous, magnetic idea that God did not require you to be poor and subservient. An idea worth dying for. They were systematically erased from history. What they don't want you to know is that the church, in its infinite mercy, burned their books along with their bodies. They buried the truth under a landslide of lies, accusations of bizarre sexual rites, devil worship, orgies in the dark. It's a playbook as old as power itself. When you can't defeat an idea, you assassinate the character of those who hold it. The peasant resistance, fueled by desperation and righteous anger, is communicating with the urban underworld, a machine of spies and thieves, the farm and the city, the field and the gutter, connected by a forbidden language carved into the foundation of your own home. This isn't about stealing bread anymore. This is about rewriting the entire feudal order. And you, standing here smelling the market's rot, are suddenly at the very center of it all. The knowledge feels like a millstone around your neck. The beggar shifts his weight, his eyes finding yours, for a terrifying, knowing instant. They know precisely the conditions that birth the poison. They also sell the only tonic that quiets the whispering sickness, the madness that follows, a tonic that makes you docile, forgetful, and thirsty for more. You trace a sigil on the stone, a sheaf of wheat intertwined with a bishop's crozier, a partnership. It's all here. The web of debt that ensures no man can ever truly own the land his ancestors bled for. The guild sanctions that strangle any craftsman who gets too clever, who innovates a tool that might grant a common man a sliver of independence. But you've seen it seal a woodsman's gaping wound, stopping the red lines of death from creeping up his arm. Penicillin, centuries before its name was ever spoken. This knowledge is a direct threat. It makes the people independent. It robs the sermons of their terror and the collection plates of their coin. It is the exact same tactic you see today when a billion-dollar industry pays to discredit a simple, natural remedy that threatens its monopoly on healing. The most heretical act has never been witchcraft. It's been healing the poor for free. You realize with a sickening lurch that this is nothing new. It's the medieval ancestor of the 20-page terms of service agreement you scroll past without reading, the fine print on a predatory loan designed so the house always wins. The power structures haven't changed, only the ink and the terminology. And then a cold dread washes over you, colder than the winter seeping from the stones. The symbols in your cellar. The ones your grandfather taught you to carve in secret. You always thought they were about the moon and the harvest, about star patterns and medicinal plants. A peasant's weapon, a tool of forbidden resistance, meant not for the knight, but for his 1,000-crown warhorse. To cripple the horse is to cripple the knight, to bring the god of steel crashing down into the mud with the rest of the mortals. To even possess such a design is treason. It is a prayer for a different kind of war, a symbol that you understand the real enemy isn't the man in the opposite army, but the man on the horse. It's a name you know, a man from the Lord's own guard. But he wasn't buying salvage. He was selling something he claimed he found near the old mill. And as you read the description of the item, a small silver locket with a distinct broken clasp, a cold dread grips you, because you know that locket, and it was supposed to have been buried with the baker's daughter 2 weeks ago. You paint them as a threat to tradition, a danger to children, a cancer on the soul of the nation. It worked on the Cathars in 1209, and it works on glowing rectangles of glass today against anyone who dares challenge the status quo. This ledger is more than an account book. It's a testament. Hidden between the lines of grain prices and weather logs are the names, a secret network of believers stretching from the Pyrenees to Lombardy. Your family weren't just chroniclers. They were a node in a web of forbidden hope. He knows you saw. He knows you understood. And now you are no longer an observer of this secret war. You are a liability or a weapon. The Church, promising a glorious afterlife to the obedient and eternal fire to the rebellious, providing the perfect ideological cover. This isn't a kingdom, it's a corporation, and human souls are its currency. They're not enemies, the Lord and the priest and the guildmaster. They are C-suite executives, each managing their division of control. One provides the physical chains, the other the mental ones. It's the most elegant, efficient, and unholy machine ever devised. A perfectly symbiotic system of oppression. It feels like a modern nightmare, the way they create the disease and then sell the only cure. The greatest secret, the one that got so many of them burned, wasn't in the plants at all. It was in their skill with a blade. They practiced a form of surgery the Church called demonic, a direct intervention with God's will. And what they don't want you to know is that it worked. Recent analysis of skeletons dug from plague pits of this era shows something impossible. Skulls with perfectly drilled holes, trepanations, that have evidence of healing, of bone growing back. These women could drill into a man's head to relieve the brain's swelling, and he would live. But looking now at the bride's pale face, at the Lord's smug smile, and at the diabolical genius of the contract in your hand, you see the truth. The star isn't a star. It's the Lord's seal. The crescent moon isn't the moon. It's the symbol for a debt owed. The drawing of the wheat sheaf is the mark for the Miller family, who lost their land last spring. It's not a map of the heavens. It's a ledger, a hidden accounting of every family, systematically broken by these contracts. They think this war is fought with banners and steel, but the real war, the one that could burn their world down, is fought with secrets like this. And you are beginning to suspect you are not the only one who knows. They told you this cathedral was built for the glory of God. The secret is, it was also built to be a bank, an astronomical computer, and a weapon. You stand in the nave, a dwarf among stone giants, where sunlight bleeds through stained glass, creating shimmering pools of ruby and sapphire on the floor. The air, thick with the scent of beeswax and cold incense, feels heavy, ancient. But it's not the scale that makes your skin crawl. It's the geometry. And now, that web is tightening into a noose. A Dominican friar arrived in the village 2 days ago. He has a gentle smile and eyes as cold and empty as a winter sky. He's an inquisitor, a wolf in shepherd's clothing, sniffing for the scent of heresy. He asked about your family's history this morning at the market. He asked about your grandmother. Your heart hammers against your ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. The cellar feels less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb. The Church will tell you that the monastery's wealth comes from God. 99% of people believe their power is built on prayer and donated land. The secret that history chose to forget is that their greatest profits came from selling a sickness they disguised as a cure. You stand in the shadow of the abbey wall as the evening bells toll, their bronze hum vibrating in your bones. The air is thick with the smells of autumn, damp earth, wood smoke, the distant scent of livestock. But there is another smell, a sweet, cloying aroma that drifts over the cold stone. The way they control the flow of information so completely that the truth sounds like the ravings of a lunatic. This is what they don't want you to know. The system isn't broken. It was built this way. Your family didn't die uncovering a secret. They died because they understood the business model. This stone isn't a history, it's an indictment, a shareholder report from hell. Each groove and line, painstakingly carved by your grandfather, then your father, is a transaction record. A life traded for a bag of poison grain, a village's hope bartered for a season of control, a procedure so delicate that your modern science only recently perfected it. They weren't burned for failing. They were burned for succeeding, for proving that the power to heal wasn't locked away in heaven, but could be found in a woman's steady hand and a garden's quiet wisdom. A cool breeze rustles the hanging bundles of foxglove, their bell-shaped flowers, beautiful and deadly. A poison that in the right hands can calm a frantic, dying heart. Digitalis. She turns, her eyes catching the last light. They aren't wild or crazed, but clear and assessing. A secret record of injustice, etched into the foundation of your own home. A list of ghosts, and you understand, with a clarity that terrifies you, that this record is the most dangerous thing in the world to possess. So why? Why would your family risk being burned alive to keep it? What they never tell you in the sermons is the exact market price of a human soul. But you are beginning to learn. You kneel, and the cold of the flagstones is a living thing, seeping through your thin leggings, climbing your shins, nesting in the marrow of your bones. It's a cold that feels ancient, hungry. Above you, the scent of frankincense is a golden lie, a thick, sweet blanket trying desperately to smother the faint, underlying odor of damp earth and decay. It never quite succeeds. Most people who kneel on these stones see only God. The curve of the vaulted ceiling, the impossible thinness of the pillars, the precise angles of the transept. It feels alive. It feels like it's thinking. 99% of people who stand here see art. They feel the presence of God. They fail to see the forbidden mathematics humming in the stone, a language the church claims it invented, but secretly stole. This is the knowledge of the master masons, a guild more secretive than any priesthood. They embedded sacred geometry and astronomical alignments into these structures. Ancient wisdom the church branded as heresy, while simultaneously claiming it as divine inspiration. You stare at the list of names, a litany of the damned, written in your own father's hand. This book is no longer a history. It is a death warrant for everyone you love. A heavy boot scrapes against the wooden floorboards directly above your head. Then, another. They're not your mother's steps. They are slow, deliberate, heavy with purpose. The sound stops. Silence. Then, a sharp, authoritative knock echoes down the stone steps. 3 raps. The Inquisitor's signal. He's here, and he's in your house. It's a scent of fermenting herbs, of something simmering, thick and syrupy. For years, you've associated that smell with piety, with healing. Now, it makes the bile rise in your throat. It's not incense. You realize with a dawning, sickening horror, it's the smell of a carefully managed addiction. This is the secret that defies 1,000 years of popular history. We are taught that these were islands of piety in a sea of medieval sin, that monks spent their days in silent contemplation and the painstaking copying of God's word. And now the silence outside breaks. It's not the scraping of stone. It's the soft, wet leather thump of a heavy boot on damp earth. Then another, deliberate, unhurried. This isn't a search party. A search party would be loud, chaotic, calling out names. This is the sound of an appointment being kept. The candle flame sputters, dancing in a sudden draft you didn't feel before. It casts your shadow, huge and terrified, against the stone indictment. The grit of dust is rough and real under your fingernails, the only thing connecting you to this moment. The footsteps stop. They look at you and see not a sinner to be absolved, but a body to be mended. And in that moment, you understand. The strange, rhythmic scraping you've been hearing from your cellar for weeks. It wasn't rats. It was the sound of a knife point on slate. You realize with a jolt of cold dread that it's a star chart, a celestial calendar mapping the precise phases of the moon, the exact nights to harvest each of these forbidden plants for their peak potency. A prescription, written in the language of the heavens. They call it the Dark Ages to hide a forbidden truth. 99% of people believe the darkness was an accident, a fog of ignorance that rolled in after Rome fell. It wasn't a fog. It was a fire, deliberately set. You are standing in its embers now. The air is thick with the ghosts of 1,000 burned ideas, an acrid smoke that stings your eyes and coats your tongue with the taste of incinerated vellum. The great library of the monastery is a skeleton of charred timbers against a gray, unforgiving sky. They see salvation in the stained glass and hope in the gilded reliquary on the altar. 99% of them believe the Church's obsession with the holy dead is about faith. They are wrong. It's a market. And the most forbidden truth, the one whispered only in rat-infested cellars and heretical circles, is that your body is not a temple, it's a commodity. Your eyes fix on the reliquary. Inside its crystal pane rests a sliver of bone, yellowed and brittle, the knuckle of a long-dead saint. The priest says it can cure sickness, ward off demons. What they don't want you to know is that this knowledge is not Christian. It flows from the Moors, from the libraries of Baghdad, from the star charts of pagan Celts who marked the solstice with standing stones long before the first cross was ever raised on this soil. You look up at a high window, a sliver of glass depicting a forgotten saint, but its purpose isn't praise. On the spring equinox, a single beam of light from that window will strike a specific, unmarked tile near the altar. It's not a miracle marking a holy day. They told you God would choose the victor. But what they don't want you to know is that God has been silent for a very, very long time. It is gold that screams the verdict. You stand in the frozen quiet of the crowd, a silence so deep you can hear the grit under your neighbor's worn leather shoes. The air is sharp with the smell of damp wool, wood smoke, and a collective, unspoken fear. Before you, in the packed dirt circle, two figures stand apart. One is a brute, a champion hired for his weight in silver. They ignore the true source of their immense wealth, the foundation of their power over the landscape. It wasn't just wine for the sacrament. Certain monastic orders, hidden behind a veneer of holiness, had perfected the art of distillation. Using strange, bubbling glass and copper contraptions brought back from the Holy Land, they created potent liquors and tonics, the medieval equivalent of patent medicines, laced with a cocktail of psychoactive herbs grown in their physic gardens. You've seen the garden. You've even admired it. The vibrant, blood-red heads of the opium poppy, nodding sleepily in the breeze. Directly outside the cellar door, you can almost feel the weight of the body on the other side of the wood, the quiet confidence of the predator that has cornered its prey. They don't need to break the door down. They have the key. They know, you know, but what illness, festering in the dark of your own home, is it meant to cure? They told the village they were burning heresy, cleansing the world of demonic words. But you were there. Hidden in the trees, you watched them drag the knowledge into the courtyard. And it wasn't the devil's work they threw onto the flames. You saw the clean, perfect lines of a Roman aqueduct, diagrams of gears and levers that could lift stone and spare a man's back. You saw pages filled with elegant Arabic script, detailing the paths of stars and the properties of healing herbs. You saw a manual on crop rotation that could have ended the winter starvations. But what they don't want you to know is that the bones of the sainted are the first great fiat currency, their value determined not by God, but entirely by the story the church attaches to them. A good story can turn a pig's bone into a holy relic worth 100 acres of land. Church records, hidden in locked scriptoriums, reveal a thriving black market where bishops secretly trade counterfeit relics, sometimes bidding on the very same holy femur that 3 other dioceses already claim to own. It's a signal, the perfect day to plant your barley for the fullest harvest. This entire cathedral is a silent computer, a secret calendar for the initiated. This place is the ultimate paradox, the most profound institutional hypocrisy imaginable. It is a public monument built to house a secret text. The very astronomical knowledge that gets women burned as witches and men tortured as heretics is the hidden engine that makes this building function. It's like a modern tech company building a global surveillance empire while running advertisements about how much they value your privacy. His armor gleams, a testament to the wealth of the merchant he represents. A man accused of fraud who stands smirking by the priest. The champion's sword is a sliver of captured daylight. His opponent, the accuser, is a boy from the next village over. He's thin, sinewy from a life of hard labor, and his face is a pale mask of terror. His only armor is a leather jerkin, his sword a rusted, pitted thing that looks more like a farm tool. The metallic taste of fear is on your tongue, sharp and coppery. For alleviating suffering, the abbot had told you once, his eyes serene, his hands tucked into his sleeves. He didn't tell you they were creating it too. Imagine this, because it's the truth they buried for 5 centuries. Financial records unearthed from the dirt floor of a dissolved English monastery will one day reveal that over 60% of its annual income came from a single product, a blessed tonic sold to the surrounding villages. This tonic, a dark, viscous liquid, contained a staggering concentration of alcohol and opiates. The heavy oak door splinters inward with a sound like snapping bone. Dust motes dance in the sliver of torchlight from the hall. They are here. But the terror you expected is gone, replaced by a clarity so cold and sharp it could cut glass. In this final moment, you finally understand. You see the complete, mind-blowing truth laid bare. The whispering sickness was never a sickness. It was a weapon. A state-sponsored terror campaign perfected over generations. You see the secret pact, signed in candlelit backrooms between power-hungry nobles and a corrupt faction of the church. They tell you the devil is a liar, but they never tell you his greatest lie is that he exists at all. The sickness they blame on him isn't in your soul, it's in your supper. It begins with the whispers. You hear them now, just at the edge of the rain's drumming against the thatch. A sibilant hiss that seems to coil around your name. You press your palms against your ears, but the sound is already inside. They weren't burning heresy. They were burning competence. They were burning independence. A month ago, you saw the charter yourself, a secret glimpse in the bishop's own study while you were cleaning. The script was stark, the order unequivocal, a command from the 10th century to destroy all texts pertaining to the mundane arts, sanitation, midwifery, architecture. He called them a distraction from God, but you saw the fear coiled behind the ink. You can almost hear the soft, greasy clink of coins as a martyr's tooth is sold to the highest bidder in a back-alley transaction. This commodification of the dead is a shadow that stretches to the living, to you. The sweat that stings your eyes as you harvest the Lord's wheat is a tithe, your labor rendered unto God's earthly accountants. The gnawing guilt for a moment of anger or a lustful thought isn't just a spiritual stain. It's a debt. The lie is so vast, so audacious, it becomes the truth for everyone who doesn't know how to look. But your family knew. Down in the damp earth of your cellar, the carving you've traced with your finger 1,000 times replicates a small, obscure pattern from the heart of the great rose window. It's not a decoration. It's a cipher key. You realize with a sudden, chilling certainty, the cold of the stone floor shooting up your spine, that your family wasn't just hiding from the world. They were deciphering it. It's your fear, but it is also his. The priest drones on about divine judgment and the sanctity of truth, but his words are hollow, lost to the wind. 99% of the people here believe him. They believe they are witnessing God's will made manifest, a holy process to reveal the innocent. You know better. You are witnessing a murder for hire, wrapped in the robes of justice and blessed by the church. This is the great lie of your age, the medieval version of the expensive lawyer. It offered a moment of blissful escape from a life of back-breaking pain. It also created a crushing dependency, ensuring a steady, desperate stream of customers. A docile, compliant, and eternally grateful populace, paying for their own chains, one silver penny at a time. It's a terrifyingly familiar historical precedent, a blueprint for the modern opioid crisis, where trusted institutions, robed in the authority of healing, profit from the very addiction they engineer. The metallic taste of fear floods your mouth. You think of the charts you keep at home, hidden beneath a loose floorboard. You see them intentionally allowing the ergot-tainted rye, the grain with the black rot, to be distributed in the very regions simmering with peasant uprisings. The mass hallucinations, the paranoia, the psychosis, they weren't a divine plague. They were a carefully cultivated harvest of fear. The perfect pretext for brutal crackdowns, for land confiscations, for the public execution of heretics, the very people, like your father, who tried to expose the truth. The herbal remedies were banned not because they were witchcraft, but because they could mitigate the poison's grip. Your tongue is a foreign country, coated in the coppery tang of old blood and rusted iron, a taste you can't spit out. In the corner of your eye, the candle flame throws a shadow that lurches and writhes, a hunched thing with too many limbs. You know it's just a trick of the light. You know this, but your heart hammers against your ribs anyway, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. This is the whispering sickness. It is not in the chronicles the monks write. The true heresy wasn't denying God. It was a populace that no longer needed to pray for every drop of clean water because they knew how to build a well. It was a family that didn't need to beg a bishop for a miracle, because they knew which plants could break a fever. A people who can feed themselves, heal themselves, and build their own world have no need for lords or bishops to rule them. Knowledge wasn't lost, it was murdered. You kneel in the soot. A debt that can be paid for with the silver you don't have, purchasing a slip of parchment, an indulgence that promises to lighten the scales of judgment. Your sins are a source of income. Even after your heart stops, your value doesn't. Your soul, lingering in the fiery waiting room of purgatory, can have its sentence shortened for a price your grieving family will be bled to pay, ensuring your final journey is as profitable as your life was. It's the blueprint. The punishment for killing the king's deer was hanging. The punishment for killing another peasant was often just a fine. What they don't want you to know is the chilling reason why a wild animal was worth more than your life. You slip between the ancient, silent oaks. The air is cold, a physical weight in your lungs, thick with the smell of moss and damp, black earth. Every sound is magnified. The man with the most coin doesn't get the best argument. He buys the strongest arm, the sharpest steel. He buys his innocence. The scraping of the champion's armored boot against a loose stone makes you flinch. It's the only sound before the fight begins. The clash of steel is a piercing shriek that rips the silence apart. It is not the clean, ringing sound from a minstrel's song. It is a hateful, grinding noise, a butcher's sound. The peasant is quick, desperate, but his every parry is met with a force that shudders through his thin body. Scrawled columns tracking the harvests, the weather, and the whispering sickness. The sickness that brings fevers, hallucinations, and a creeping dread that hollows out a person from the inside. For months, you've tracked its ebb and flow, blaming cursed wells or tainted grain. But now, you see the other column, the one you marked with a small cross, the dates the monk's cart arrived in your village, its shelves lined with glistening vials of their cure. You picture the thick, sweet liquid pouring from the vial, the syrupy drip clinging to the lip of the bottle before it falls. The books were burned, not for heresy, but to erase any knowledge of agriculture or mycology that could reveal the fungus for what it was. The debt, the trials, the hunger, all tools to crush anyone who got too close. Your family wasn't just a family. You were the keepers of this truth, the last in a line of chroniclers, documenting a centuries-long crime against humanity. This isn't just history. It is a warning. The medieval playbook for social control was never abandoned. It was only perfected. It is a secret the church buried under sermons of demonic possession, a truth they scrubbed from history with holy water and fire. 99% of people, even in the centuries to come, will believe these medieval plagues of the mind were caused by religious fervor, by mass hysteria born of piety and fear. The truth is so much simpler and so much more terrifying. It's biological warfare. You saw what it did to Elspeth from the weaver's cottage. Your fingernails scrape against the scorched earth, the sound a tiny, desperate protest in the suffocating silence. You're searching for a survivor, a single page that escaped the purge. This systemic de-intellectualization is the bedrock of their power, a strategy so effective it still echoes today. It's the algorithm that buries a damning document beneath 1,000 mindless distractions. It's the deplatforming of a voice that speaks an inconvenient truth. The ghost of a system that will echo for 1,000 years. An engine designed to extract value from every corner of human existence. From your attention, your data, your very identity. You are the raw material. You are the product. A chill entirely separate from the stone floor spiders its way up your spine. It's a sudden, horrifying clarity. An image of the carving in the cellar flashes in your mind, the one you thought was a child's scratching. The intersecting lines, the strange symbols. It's not a prayer, it's not a curse. It's a map. The soft squelch of your thin leather shoes sinking into mud. The whisper of a fern against your woolen tunic. The frantic, hammering drum of your own heart against your ribs. A twig snaps somewhere in the darkness to your left. You freeze, every muscle screaming, your breath catching in your throat like a shard of ice. To be caught here means a trial you cannot win, a rope, a dance on empty air. This is the king's forest, forbidden land. But that's the story they tell, the one written by the lords and the scribes. The champion is a machine of muscle and steel, methodical, patient. He is not fighting for his life. He is doing a job. What the official records will never show, what historians will overlook for centuries, is the staggering truth hidden in the court rolls. A 90% victory rate for the party who could afford a professional warrior. God wasn't in control. Money was. That sound, that tiny wet plink, has been the sound of relief for so many. The sound of a mother soothing a feverish child. The sound of a farmer numbing an aching back. It is the sound of a perfect trap. Staring at the cold, unfeeling stone of the monastery, you finally understand. The whispering sickness wasn't just caused by bad rye. Its symptoms, its very rhythm, were being amplified and controlled by the cures. The monks weren't fighting the plague. They were farming it. Your family's charts don't track a disease. They track a business model. They still manufacture crises to make you afraid, to make you beg them to take away your freedoms for a little safety. They still control the story. Only now the pulpit is a screen and the heretic is called a conspiracy theorist. They still create economic systems of debt and dependency, so you are too tired, too busy surviving to look up and see the bars of your cage. They push their own blessed tonics, addictive media, distracting ideologies, chemical comforts to keep you sedated and compliant. The technology has changed, but the strategy is identical. One day she was humming at her loom. The next she was in the village square, limbs jerking in a dance of pure agony, screaming at the sun, her eyes wide with visions only she could see. The priest declared a demon had taken root in her soul. He held up a cross, and the whole village prayed, their fear a thick, sweet smoke in the air. But you saw the flecks of purple-black mold on the rye bread her husband bought from the Lord's mill just last week. The same bread that sits in your own pantry. It's the reason you're taught the names of kings and battles, but not the names of the women who knew how to safely deliver a child, or the men who knew how to build a chimney that wouldn't kill a family in their sleep. Control the information, and you control the future. Your fingers close around something brittle, a corner of a page miraculously spared. It's still warm. You lift it, and in the pale morning light, you see a single perfect drawing. The anatomy of the human eye. Below it, a line of Latin, Veritas vos liberabit. The realization hits you with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from your lungs. The marks on that stone show the hidden places, the fallow fields and forgotten groves, outside the churchyard's consecrated walls. They are the locations of the unconsecrated graves, the final resting places of heretics and witches, whose families buried them in secret in the dead of night. It was never about defying God. It was about protecting their dead from a fate worse than hellfire. 99% of people believe the tale of the desperate, starving poacher, a lone man risking death for a rabbit to feed his children. It's a simple, tragic story. It's also a lie, crafted to hide a much more dangerous truth. What they truly fear isn't that you'll steal a deer. It's that you'll remember this forest doesn't belong to them. For generations before their stone castles and their paper laws, this was the commons. This was the great, breathing larder of the people. The cure for your child's fever grows on a stalk by the stream. It was a way for the powerful to eliminate rivals, seize land from a farmer who dared to question a boundary line, or silence a woman who accused a lord of a crime too dark to name. The end is swift and ugly. The peasant's rusty sword snaps. The crowd gasps as one, a single horrified lung. For a heartbeat, the boy stands defenseless, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with the final, stark understanding of his fate. The champion's blade arcs down, not with passion, but with the flat efficiency of an executioner. And your entire village, your family, yourself, you are not parishioners. You are the crop. The powerful did not want a medieval peasant who could feed himself, and they do not want a modern citizen who can think for himself. The truth they buried under castles of stone, and the truths they bury now under mountains of data, are one and the same. You are more powerful than they have ever wanted you to believe. They lied about the past. What else are they lying about now? They danced Elspeth until her heart burst. They called it an exorcism. You know it was murder by poison. Forensic archaeologists of the future will dig up villages like yours. In the bones of the so-called possessed, they will find shocking concentrations of ergot alkaloids. This is the secret's name, ergot, a fungus that grows on damp rye, a rot that blooms in the heart of your daily bread. It is a powerful hallucinogen, the very substance from which they will one day synthesize a drug called LSD. It wasn't God or the devil making Elspeth dance. The truth will set you free. As you read the words, the parchment gives up its fight, turning to a fine black powder in your palm that whispers away on the breeze. The sound is as quiet and final as a last breath. And that's when the cold dread washes over you, a chilling realization that connects this smoldering ruin to your own small, desperate secret. It was a desperate act to keep their loved ones from being dug up by church officials, their bodies desecrated for show, or worse, carved apart and sold piece by piece into the very holy market you now see with unveiled eyes. The wood to keep you from freezing through the winter is all around you. The mushrooms, the berries, the nuts, the fish, everything you need for a life independent of the Lord's suffocating control is here, free for the taking. The forest laws weren't about protecting the king's hunt. They were about destroying the last bastion of your freedom. They were designed to make you dependent, to make you forget you could ever survive without them. You press your back against the rough, cold bark of an elm, listening. A wet, percussive thud echoes in the stillness. And then there is only the slow, dark stain spreading across the dirt. The merchant smiles, accepts the priest's blessing, and walks away, an innocent man. As the crowd disperses, whispering of God's righteous judgment, you remain frozen. Your mind is not on the dead boy being dragged from the circle. It is in the damp, root-choked cellar beneath your home. It's on the old oak beam, darkened by a century of smoke and secrets. They told you gargoyles were to ward off evil spirits. It's a childish story whispered to keep you from asking the real question. Why are they all screaming? You look up at the cathedral roofline, a jagged crown of stone against a bruised twilight sky. The faces are twisted in agony, in rage, in a silent, eternal shriek. Your skin prickles with a cold that has nothing to do with the evening air. You finally understand. They aren't looking outward to scare away demons. They are looking downward, at you. 99% of people accept the folklore. It was poison, meticulously cultivated and distributed. Your fingernails scrape against the rough wood of the table. The sound a dry, desperate rasp in the quiet room. Scrape, scrape, the sound of a mind holding on by a thread. This is the nobility's perfect, invisible weapon. A population driven mad is a population that cannot rebel. A man who sees demons in the fog is too busy fighting shadows to fight his lord, and the priests are their willing accomplices. They don't offer a cure. They offer a narrative. The diagrams you've been carving onto salvaged planks in the damp quiet of your cellar. The water screw, the three-field system, the recipe for willow bark tea to soothe the fever. They aren't just a curiosity. They are a crime. Each line you carve is a refugee, a piece of this hunted truth. You are not a student. You are a smuggler of light in an age determined to enforce the dark. A sudden crack of a twig from the woods behind you makes you freeze. You hear the heavy tread of a boot on damp earth. The greatest lie they tell you about this city isn't spoken in the church or decreed from the castle wall. It's the one you smell on the air, the one that clings to your clothes like a ghost. They want you to believe it is the stench of ignorance, of filth, of a people who live and die in their own waste. But the truth is in what's missing. You pull your woolen cloak tighter, the damp cold seeping into your bones. The only sound is the wet drip of water from leaf to leaf, a tiny rhythmic tick that counts the seconds of your stolen liberty. You are not alone out here. You are part of a secret, sprawling anarchy. Recent archaeological evidence, buried for centuries, proves what the official histories tried to erase. The foundations of hidden settlements deep in the woods, the remains of secret workshops and forges, a parallel society thriving in the shadows. We had our own laws, our own leaders, our own trade routes, silent pathways known only to the initiated. Carved into it is a long list of names, etched by your grandfather and his father before him. For years you thought it was a record of your ancestors. But as you stare at the blood-soaked ground, the truth finally becomes clear, a cold weight in your gut. It isn't a family tree. It's a list of the dead, a secret chronicle of every person from this village, murdered by a system designed to protect the rich. Your family has been documenting a century of sanctioned killings. They cross the square, glance up at the grotesque menagerie, and feel a sense of divine protection. They are thanking their jailers. The forbidden truth, the one that gets a man hanged for heresy or a woman burned for witchcraft, is that the gargoyles were a tool. They were the most brilliant instrument of psychological control ever devised. A constant, unblinking, grotesque reminder that you were being watched. not just by God, whose judgment is a distant, unknowable thing, but by the earthly power of the church, a power with very real dungeons and very sharp blades. They take your hallucinations, the whispers, the flickering things in the dark, and name them sin. They take your paranoia and call it guilt. It is the ultimate form of gaslighting, an ancient blueprint for making people so afraid of a manufactured threat that they will surrender any freedom for the illusion of safety. They make you believe your poisoning is a moral failure. They turn your mind into your own prison and hand the key to God. The cold from the floor seeps into your bones, a dread deeper than the night outside. You think of the cellar. They didn't just come for the library. They're hunting for the librarians. Your boots make a thick, sucking sound in the mud of the lane, a street that's more river than road after the morning's rain. The air is heavy, layered with the smells of life, the sharp tang of wood smoke from 100 chimneys, the earthy scent of wet thatch, the animal warmth of the weaver shop, where lanolin and sweat mingle. You smell roasting meat, sour ale, and the ever-present hint of human closeness. But you don't smell rot. Not the mountains of festering garbage the stories will tell of this age. You look for it, but it isn't there. This was the great terror of the nobility. Not a hungry peasant, but an organized one. It's the same reason modern systems are built to discourage self-sufficiency, pushing everyone towards centralized dependence, making you fear the freedom your ancestors died for. The quiet threat that if enough people learn to live from the land, to trust their community, the entire architecture of power would collapse. The map, hidden beneath a loose stone in your cellar, is burned into your memory. You see it now, even in the pitch-black woods. And the name of the boy who just died is now yours to carve. 3 people in this city knew the secret in its entirety. The bishop, his face a mask of piety. The master mason, his hands shaping the lies from stone. And the Lord, who paid for the silence in gold. Some modern historians now theorize what you know in your bones to be true. The faces aren't random. They were modeled after the dead, after the executed, after heretics, rebels, and blasphemers whose crimes were so severe that a simple death wasn't enough. They needed to be made into a permanent, public exhibition of the price of disobedience.